everyone. Lots of activity in the startup space today. I'm Priya Sheth and you're watching the Daily Dispatch. The top companies that are making a buzz in the startup space today include Leap, Beto, as well as Ola Electric. Now, headline number one, Leap, a startup that enables students to study overseas through financial and career assistance, has raised about $55 million in a Series C round of funding led by Owl Ventures. Now, this new investment will be used to build new products and extend them to students across the globe. It's also looking to broaden its product portfolio, where it plans to offer international students credit card as well as insurance products. Well, headline number two, Beto, a digital health ecosystem for chronic condition management, has acquired Pune-based Novik Health for an undisclosed amount. Through this acquisition, Beto will be augmenting its services of combating diabetes through clinically proven management, reduction, and reversal of diabetes by addressing the root cause of the condition. Well, moving on to the third headline of the day, Ola Electric has now postponed its sale of electric scooters to September 15th, owing to technical glitches on its website. Earlier, the startup, which is rolling out the first two new electric scooters, S1 and S1 Pro, had announced the sale of these scooters on September 8th.
The billion-dollar drone market in India is set for a huge boost with India formalizing the drone regulations. This move aligns with the government's aim to make India a drone hub by 2030. The new drone policy of 2021 eases up earlier restrictions on drone permissions, security clearances, and fees involved in the procedures. The Civil Aviation Ministry is in the process of setting up a digital Skye platform to manage the clearances. They will also develop an interactive airspace map with 3 zones: yellow, red, and green. It will indicate to drone operators the areas they are allowed to fly in. A report by PwC suggests that India's drone market is poised to hit $885 million in 2021. Given the expected demand, the reports forecast the market to grow to $1.81 billion by FY26, growing at a CAGR of 14.61%. The new rules are an effort by the government to encourage the private and commercial players in the drone industry. Startups and other stakeholders will now be able to use drones effectively for growth purposes. A flurry of new job opportunities will also be created since liberalized rules will open up skies for most businesses. Verticals like transportation, logistics, defense, and mining will hire for drone-related jobs. Tech companies can use AI-enabled drone data as information gathering resources. While there is strong policy wind pushing drones to the sky, the concerns over data privacy continue to be debated in the industry and among activists.
Well, moving on to our second segment, we have with us a very interesting host of speakers out here, and they're going to be talking to us about the new drone rules that have just been issued by the government and what it really means for the whole industry as well as the whole evolving scenario. Joining us on this panel is Prateek from Dunzo. We have Swapnik who's joining us from Skye Mobility, and we have Rahul who's joining us from SenseHawk. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us today on this panel. I want to begin with you, Rahul, to try to understand what the regulations really mean at this point in time. Are these welcome regulations for the Indian industry, and what does it really mean when it comes to stakeholders in the industry?
Yes. So, Priya, definitely welcome, regulations. This was an area that was sort of in the gray zone for a long time. We had earlier several interactions with the government and representatives in the Ministry of Civil Aviation as well. It was, from 2015 or 2016 onwards, it's always been sort of very constrained policy or the draft policies that were in place. So the current framework is what it should, have been in the beginning. So it's a very, very welcome change. I think the basic principle that it operates on is on the premise of trust, self-certification, and non-intrusive monitoring, and that's the core which was sort of missing in the earlier draft versions, where there was a lot of suspicion, policing-based kind of a mindset, where you needed permissions for everything. So they have considerably simplified and made it very easy to fly. I mean, just like regulations have been enabled in the US or in countries like Australia and so on, where it's very easy to, with after meeting some basic criteria and getting like license for a remote pilot, you can pretty much fly, subject to certain constraints. The basic outline is that, they have reduced the paperwork considerably. There's reduction in fees, and many other permissions that were required earlier, they have all been eliminated. There were all kinds of approvals and certifications that they wanted. Earlier, they made it easy from a single window clearance perspective, and also made it easy for organizations or enterprises to own and operate drones.
I want to bring you in here, Swapnik, to try to understand from the manufacturing and from the product point of view, what does it really mean? Because, I do understand that you provide services and, drones for several different purposes out there. So tell us a little bit from your perspective.
Yeah, so thanks, Priya. So echoing the same sentiments Mr. Rahul has just mentioned, it's the regulations have been reduced quite a bit, right? So there's a lot of paperwork that we had to do, a lot of licenses that we had to get, a lot of permissions that we don't need to do as much anymore. So to highlight one of the things is security clearance. That takes a really long time. So one security clearance for me took like 6 to 7 months to get done. This is not from the local police station, from the MHA that had to be done. So things like that have been removed. So it's a lot easier to get permission. So that means the number of use cases are going to rise. The people using the drones for different use cases are going to increase considerably. So that means the demand has gone up, right? So as a manufacturer or provider of services, which is good for business for us, because we can invest money knowing that you're going to have a lot more business coming in. And also, if you see the rules for R&D purpose, it has been relaxed. So if we register ourselves as an R&D, certain qualifications that we have, you can do a lot of prototypes, building drones for prototype or research. You don't need to get any permissions. So they've given us the liberty to go test and innovate. So that is good for us. So that means the industry itself can drive innovation a lot more for what the actual use cases in India people need to. So which is a good thing overall for us.
Right, that's an interesting perspective out there. Prateek, I want to bring you in out here. Dunzo has been an early mover in implementation of drones for delivery. And that's, I think, the route that a lot of players want to follow going forward. So tell us a little bit about your experience. You've already begun piloting services in Telangana. So what has been the experience so far?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. So at Dunzo, we are a part of 2 experimental trials for beyond visual line of sight operations. And these 2 projects, one is with the DGCA, which is an experimental trial to operate for 100 hours to see, how efficiently can we operate a drone beyond your visual line of sight. So anything in the visual line of sight is up to 500 meters. So anything beyond that, it qualifies as BV loss. So, we are working on that trial, and we'll be beginning that soon. And the other project is called the Medicines from the Sky with the government of Telangana, as you rightly pointed out, wherein, come next month, we will be conducting experimental drone trials with our colleague here, Swapnik, from Skye. The idea is to test, how can drones be used to deliver medicines or relief goods in far off lands wherein accessibility through road or any other mode of transportation is either time consuming or difficult, right? It's a difficult terrain to reach. So using these drones, how can, let's say, from a district hospital, you can reach to a primary healthcare center and transport medication or vaccine applicability or the use cases of drones for various uses. Medicines is just one. After the drone rules being liberalized, we'll also see more use cases as we move along. Infrastructure monitoring and road surveys and agricultural monitoring is some of the use cases which have already been initiated by the government, and the private sector is also steadily moving towards that. So I think this is a welcome move by the government of India.
I want to bring both Rahul and Swapnik here into this conversation to understand, important critical elements like security as well as, how data can be used for these, when and how basically the utilization of the whole process should be at this point in time. So, Rahul, from your point of view and from the security perspective, what kind of changes or what kind of regulations should one follow to ensure that there are minimum data breaches and security is complied with?
Sure. I mean, I would actually, while they are sort of the same areas, I would separate these two. I mean, from when you talk about security and data breach. So one aspect is around security, which typically the common notion, which obviously we have seen some incidents of, is where drones can be used in this, by miscreants to create, trouble, right, and so on. The basic principle is again based on self-trust and this thing, because what happens is somebody who really wants to create trouble, they don't really wait to see if the regulation allows them to do that, right? I mean, they will do or cause trouble, however, which irrespective of whatever regulation you have, right? So the security problem can only be solved in some sense by ensuring, that at the there is anti-drone defense systems and so on at critical installations, right? Is what you can really solve for here. You can't really do too much in terms of really protecting that way, because in general, if you see countries like the US and so on, which have had liberal drone regulations for several years now, for the last 4 or 5 years, it's been working fine. There's really been no security incidences there, right? Because by and large, people use it for whatever is the beneficial purpose, either recreational or some commercial applications. So that's my point of view or perspective on the security aspect. On the data breach or the data security side, there of course there is a general guideline that the government has around data security, privacy, and so on. And in general, depending on what the application is, if it's a large enterprise, they will do the necessary things. Companies like us, at SenseHawk, we ensure that the software that we use, the data that we handle that's collected from drones, is subject to the best possible sort of standards and practices by complying with standards like ISO 27001 or SOC 2 and so on, right? So I think there again, the enterprises and players in the industry will ensure that these kinds of practices are being followed, because they are worried about the data and data security in general.
Right, Swapnik, what is your view on the whole security and data privacy aspect?
Yeah, so along the same lines, regulations is not the way to clamp down on it. Yes, regulations themselves won't stop people who have ill intentions or to create some damage. So best way to go about is use technologies for countermeasures. And use anti-drone technology, or any portable ones also. There are a lot of research that's being done right now, and products have been developed to handle these kind of scenarios. And I think Theo has done quite a bit already. And there are other private players in India and in international market who are working on it. There is also an NPNT compliant device that you have to use on the drone for every drone that's there, that is to connect to a digital Skye. So I think that's where we can probably add a little bit more safeguards and safety measures on there, the requirements purposes that will help overall in the security and even in the data protection side of it. I think that can be a critical and crucial one that we can use going forward so that every drone has that and everything can be logged, tracked, and there can be limitations placed on the usage of drones through the NPNT compliance that will help. But I think the best way to go forward is to work on anti-drone and countermeasures using technology.
Right. Prateek, I want to understand like last mile challenges from you, considering that you are going to be dealing with a lot of these challenges as you move along the way. So are there any challenges that you've identified in your pilot so far, and what kind of changes are you suggesting both to the manufacturing front as well as the operational team to minimize these kind of perhaps challenges or errors in last mile delivery?
So to answer your question, in terms of the trials, we are still yet to conduct the trials. They begin 4th of October next month. However, from a point of view of last mile delivery challenges, for a hyper-local delivery player like Dunzo, what we need to solve for or think for is when we move to a stage of, let's say, commercial deliveries of essential items, where would that be delivered? Can that be delivered to a household, or can that be delivered to an area that is dedicated for drone-based deliveries? So that's a very basic question that comes up in not only the minds of the businesses, but also the consumers, right? And it's fascinating to also think about that. So what is required is a mix of both policy intervention as well as the infrastructure or city planning bit that we need to think about. Now, I'll first start with the policy bit, right? From a policy bit, before you can start operating a drone or for commercial delivery, right now the new policy has dedicated 3 zones, the green, yellow, and red zones within which you can operate. So for commercial deliveries, I believe it will be mostly green zone, which is helping deliveries of essentials or any other product that needs to be delivered for any use case, right? So in that green zone, when you operate, you will need a drone operator would need prior permission to fly through the framework of traffic, which will be launched by the government in the next 60 days. That's the air traffic management policy for drones, right? So once you have that permission, you can operate the drone, and you get a clearance basically to operate the drone in that particular zone. So once you do that, the drone would move towards a geography which has been pinned, or using the latitude and the longitude details to deliver the product. Now then comes the infrastructure part. Where would it be delivered? In other countries, as my fellow panelists were also speaking about, in the US or in Australia or in parts of Finland, Wing, which is also an Alphabet company by Google, the drones drop these products in lawns, in common parks, or at the top of apartment complexes. In a country like India, wherein with every pin code you have more than I would say 500,000 people, we need to think about smarter ways of bringing efficiencies and scale. So one way that we could envisage was starting with deliveries at apartment complexes, because that's easy. You have a dedicated area. You can drop the products, so that it becomes easier for multiple people to pick up products at the same time. The other could be wherein you have dedicated drone ports, which are being created at the top of the buildings or houses, wherein a drone using a QR code scanner before landing itself can drop the products. So it's a very interesting time, and we are solving for a lot of last mile challenges as we do these trials. And I'm sure next month, once we do them, we'll have a lot more learnings to share.
Right, I'm going to come to you, Rahul, to understand the kind of loopholes and challenges that are there in this regulation. But before that, Swapnik, I want to bring you in to understand the kind of demand that you've seen. Now, following these drone rules has opened up doors for a lot more companies to go ahead and experiment with these kind of deliveries, just like Dunzo is doing. So what kind of demand have you seen so far, and how are you going to look at catering to this demand?
Yeah, so definitely there is a demand. I think there's interest has picked up. So we are seeing a lot of private hospitals also reaching out to us. A lot of delivery, organizations that are reaching out to us to do trials. Right, they want to understand beforehand. So there's a little bit of buzz that's going on, but right now they want to understand. Okay, what is it? When you're using it, how does it help you? What are the nitty-gritty details of it? So there's a lot more trials that are going on right now. So we are educating them. We are also working with them to help them understand the business model that will eventually come to them. What are the practically where it will work and where it won't work. So the best way for us to prepare is to do a lot more operations. We have trials lined up, like Prati just mentioned with Dunzo. and we'll have a lot more that we'll learn going forward. So we have 100 hours of flight coming up for the DGCA one, and that is going to help us a lot in learning practically, where all do we need to scale up technology-wise and the operational standard of operations for the BV loss operations. So that's going to help, and then in the future, we believe more experience we get, the more clients we do, it's only going to get better. So the best way is to just expand our operations team and get the technology ready, and then learn from it, and then scale up the product.
But Swapnik, will costs come down? And that is the general belief that people are working with, that cost of drones will reduce, considering that there will be a larger volume of drones available in the market.
Yeah, definitely. I think it will come down because you're talking about scale, right? And there's a lot more quantity. So right now the demand is not that high. The cost of manufacturing or procuring parts that you want to assemble your drone or manufacture your drone is quite high. I think once you get to a stage where you have the per unit cost is going to come down quite a bit, and then you'll have a lot more of skilled personnel available. Things are going to get a lot more streamlined, and so that will help overall.
Right, Rahul, if you could tell us what kind of loopholes or challenges are there in these regulations that need to be addressed at this point in time, if you could highlight some that you may have noted from the regulations so far.
Yeah, I wouldn't call them loopholes and challenges. I think they have done a pretty good job of really eliminating a lot of the constraints and the challenges that were there in the earlier, draft policies. I guess what it needs to be done is just, detail out and implement a few key things. I would say two broad areas is one is the NPNT compliance mechanism. How is it going to exactly work? It should work seamlessly. The Digital Skye and the integration with the Digital Skye platform has to work, right? So it's really about implementation more than challenge. I think, and there will be some initial teething troubles and challenges, I'm sure, as they go about it. That is one area, and the second is what Pratik and Swapnik have been talking about is the beyond visual, line of sight, the BV loss kind of policy framework that will enable long distance, beyond visual line of sight flying, which is obviously very critical and important for delivery type of applications, but it is also an enabler for industrial applications where you can use drones with longer ranges to cover and map large areas, right, in one flight, for example, as opposed to using let's say quadcopters that can cover only a certain range or certain area, right? So I think these are the two areas that require more development on the policy and implementation, right, from an implementation perspective.
Right, Pratik, I want to end by asking you a little bit about what kind of dependence will be on drones versus delivery boys. Is there some sort of rationalization in terms of needing more delivery boys that will come into play if drones will be implemented, and what kind of breakup do you see going forward?
Right. That's an excellent question and pretty valid. We are getting a lot of these questions. So this is how Dunzo looks at it, and so drone-based commercial operations, as we know, will begin from a trial phase for commercial applications, both for the public and the private sector. For the private sector, you would see FMCG companies, you would see bigger conglomerates coming forward and partnering with delivery companies, or would like to partner with delivery companies, and so would we, to create a use case for consumers to actually see the delivery of products, something as simple as like your favorite beverage getting delivered at home. And from the public sector, delivery of medicines for the government, as I spoke about. So these use cases would come into the picture. Now, from a point of view of the skill, I think what becomes important to know as part of the rules and otherwise as well, that drone pilots would be required, and there will be an exponential demand in the coming years as we become the civil aviation capital of the world, and unmanned, aviation capital of the world. So now what is required, the pilot licensing or the drone pilot licensing has been also fairly liberalized. All that an operator requires is he needs to be, cleared his 10 standard, identity proof, and he can get started, right? He needs to go to a DGCA certified training academy, do a drone pilot course certification program, and then he gets a drone pilot license, which is valid for 10 years, right? Now, of course, the training happens across specific categories of drones. We also see more such training programs getting evolved so that it can be both for visual line of sight operations as well as beyond visual line of sight of operations. And what we feel is that it will augment the surface transportation model. It would not entirely replace that, because even in developed markets, what we have seen is this is a premium service that comes at a cost. So while it is entirely up to the customer or the user to get their products delivered to them in the shortest period of time, and Dunzo provides them that option both through surface transportation models. We envisage and we wish to do that even for aerial models in case of drones. Now, in terms of skilling, again, one is you can have a certain set of people or drone pilots who are enabling those deliveries. However, we understand that we also have aspirations of existing delivery partners, and we would love to help them get trained or run a program wherein they can also do drone-based deliveries and add to it. And in this regard, we have the aerospace sector skill council in India, all right, and of course we have DGCA certified training academies which are already operational. So we feel that this is a culmination and it is beautifully integrated. In the future, we will see both these models working in tandem to get the last mile delivery challenge solved.
All right. On that note, gentlemen, many thanks for joining us for this very insightful panel discussion. I'm sure the audience has a lot of takeaways from this panel discussion. Thank you so much for your time.
Well, time now to wrap up this edition of the Daily Dispatch. Wish you and your family a very happy Ganesh Chaturthi. I'll catch you on Monday at 5 p.m. Goodbye and have a lovely weekend.